Hi, it's Jeff here from discoverdouble-bass.com. That's the home of online video bass lessons. So if you'd like to learn more about the double bass, please go and check out the website after this video. Now, today's lesson is for beginners and I'm going to be introducing you to Bossa Nova style bass lines on the double bass. We're going to be talking about the common patterns, riffs that you'll be using when you're playing in a Bossa Nova style, particularly if you're playing it in a jazz band, because this is really expected of all jazz bass players, that they're able to play basic Latin tunes, particularly Bossa Nova style. And to demonstrate, we're going to be using the most well-known of this kind of genre, which is The Girl from Ipanema. So let's get into the details. Now, for you jazz bass players out there, when you're playing Bossa Nova bass lines, you'll be coming from a background of playing walking bass, which has got a number of really big differences in it. One is that walking bass lines generally change note on each beat. Well, they certainly change pitch on each beat. Whereas Bossa Nova bass lines are much simpler, roots and fifths. So you've got to get out of the habit of changing note all the time and over embellishing your bass lines. Bossa Nova is a really, it's a groove, and the bass drum pattern is going dum ch bum bum ch bum bum ch bum bum, and you want to be locking in. But just to introduce you to the sound, it's roots and fifth and roots and fifth. That's the sort of the pattern that you'll be most familiar with. But what I would say is at the start, experiment with just playing half notes. And the bass has got such a lovely rich tone. Let that kind of shine by leaving the space. Don't always fill in with this dotted quarter note, eighth note pattern. And when you listen to the early versions of Girl from Ipanema, particularly the Stan Getz and Astrid Gilberto version that most people are familiar with, the bass line is just playing half notes. And there's no reason when you're at the jazz jam session that you can't just keep it really simple and groove like that. But the room that you have to move into to get, have a lot of fun with this is that you can play the roots and the fifths all over the bass. So let's just have an experiment with that. I'm going to use open strings now. Maybe back down to just a passing note there. Now playing the fifth higher up, and you can play the fifth below. And experiment with the way that sounds. It changes the groove to me. I hear, let me just give you an example in C. So I'm playing the fifth above the root note. It's got a lighter feel than putting the fifth note below the root note. So experiment with the way that changes your bass line. Experiment with how that makes it feel and changes the groove. So using the bossa rhythm, using the root and the fifth, let's have a look at the variations that we can come up with. So rather than just going root, fifth, fifth, root, root, fifth, fifth, we could go root, 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 fifth, fifth, root, root, fifth. You see the difference? And then maybe add in the octave. So how about, here's another one, we could go root, fifth, and then the fifth an octave lower. That's the original one. to the variation. And what I found is that really you want to be using the first pattern as the kind of the foundation of what you're playing, and then add in these variations. And when you start exploring all of the different options, you've got tons of material to use. And I think to get the most from this lesson, you should go through the chord sequence for Girl from Ipanema that I'll post below, and just try and work out all the different variations. Use this as a study of root and fifths while staying true to the bossa rhythm, and you'll really get a lot out of your practice time. So lastly, I'm going to give you a couple of tips to help you with the rhythm for this. It's really important that you're doing it correctly. And the first one is that you make sure that you're feeling the subdivisions properly as straight eighth notes rather than swung eighth notes that you would have when you're playing walking bass. So let me show you exactly what I mean. I'll put the metronome on to help us. Okay, so the pattern that we're playing is and when you're playing jazz with a triplet feel, it's quite easy to have that so kind of ingrained into your playing that before you know it, you slip into a kind of swing feel. So let's go back to the straight feel. Straight. So make sure, turn the metronome off there, make sure that you're not accidentally switching between those two rhythms. It's unlikely that you play the whole thing as a swing feel, but what you might find is that you blur into it a little bit. And I absolutely hear this with drummers who are not as experienced, that they're so used to playing swing all the time on the gig that when they get to the straight Latin stuff, that they just kind of blur it and they start playing swung, you know, or swinging their quavers a little bit. And what I'd like you to do is make sure that you're sticking in the right, you know, the right feel for Latin music. My last tips are that you record yourself and check that you're not, you know, rushing. What tends to happen is when you've got a long note and a short note combination like here, is that you can end up rushing and cutting short the longer note. So, and the rhythm starts to kind of get a little bit mushy. So make sure, practice with a metronome, make sure that you're actually playing it accurately. And also try to make sure that you're not accenting the upbeat, that you're not the passing note. So you want to be accenting the downbeat. So the long note is the accented note, or the heavier note if you like. The main thing is that you don't accidentally accent the upbeat. If you keep them the same or kind of add a bit more weight to the downbeat, and your groove will really start feeling a lot more comfortable. So I hope that the lessons helped you today. We've covered a lot of ground, and the way that you'll get the most from it, as I said, is check out the chord sequence below and just spend some time in the practice room looking at all the different variations, and don't rush any part of this, because it's something that I could practice for hours and hours and hours and still find new routes through the chords. So make sure that you're doing that and you'll really get the most from your practice time. If you've enjoyed the lesson, you can let me know by clicking that like button. Keep practicing hard, and I'll see you next time.